Well, we've been talking to Mark Medina all summer long. A lot happened in the offseason, and now the NBA's regular season finally underway. Hey, Mark, how are you?
I'm doing well. I've been enjoying NBA opening week. It just seems like there's too many games going on at once, but that's a good thing.
That's kind of how I feel. I feel like I can't really follow everything that we've seen, and there's a lot of compelling storylines. Let's start with Victor Wembanyama because why not? We'll jump around the league a little bit, but a lot of people watching his highly anticipated debut. Limited minutes. I think he had one block. I'm not sure how much he ended up with, but what was your overall impressions of his debut?
My overall impressions of Victor Wembanyama's debut are two things. One, he is going to be the real deal. He is a special player, generational talent. But two, it's going to take time. We have to temper the expectations. The Spurs, I don't think, are expected to make the playoffs or even seriously be a bidder to make the play-in tournament. It's about just allowing Victor Wembanyama, as well as the rest of the young roster, to grow organically. And so naturally, Victor Wembanyama, being any rookie, even for himself, is going to go through growing pains. But I think what we've seen is just so many tangible reasons to think he is going to be that next generational NBA star. I mean, he has such a great touch around the rim, knows how to finish, has a great outside shot. He's an amazing shot blocker. His wingspan is unbelievable. And not only is he going to be blocking shots, he's going to be altering shots as well as preventing opponents from, driving to the lane because I think they'll think twice because they know Victor's there. He's a great team defender. And even though obviously he has that rail thin frame of his, I think that he hasn't shown any hesitation with mixing up with some of the other, physical NBA players around the league. It will be an adjustment, but I think it's something that Victor has shown that he's equipped to handle.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because it's the first thing that kind of strikes you when you watch him come through the tunnel out onto the floor and you say like, "Oh, I wonder this kid has so much potential. Is he going to grow into this frame that he's got that's pretty rail thin?" But he has defended that in the past and said that, it's not something that he feels like is as big of an issue as maybe others do. How do you sort of view that? I mean, what does the maturation process look like for him? You've been preaching patience in terms of tempering expectations with him and what the Spurs are capable of this season for a long time before he made this debut. Is it going to take a season? Is it going to take two seasons? Could this be sort of who he is? And like you said, he doesn't necessarily shy away from that physicality.
Yeah, I think it's all the above, and I'll tackle this one by one. I think that when we look at Victor Wembanyama's game and what ultimately his career will be, we know his defining card will be having ball handling skills like a point guard and being a great rim protector and ultimate do it all everything offensively as far as his shooting capabilities. He's not going to be seen as an enforcer, and so with that, that doesn't mean that he doesn't have to address his weaknesses. I talked with some NBA personnel around the league, and they think it'll take until about year three before he's fully adapting to the physical nature of the NBA, as well as putting on the necessary strength and muscle to be able to absorb that contact. But the thing that leaves those same people feeling encouraged about Victor Wembanyama is he has a skill set to rely on as he's going through those growing pains, and he has a skill set that will be a defining calling card, even if he addresses those other areas of weakness. And because those skills are just so unique and just so special, I think that the other weaknesses won't be so pronounced. But I think because it is year one, and that's what happens with every young NBA player, these weaknesses will be much more pronounced. But as time goes on, they'll almost be afterthoughts.
How did the Lakers look to you out of the gate?
Well, it's been early season struggles and early season signs of hope and question marks. I think what was interesting when you're looking at the fact that they're 1-1 now after the first two games is game one against the Denver Nuggets. LeBron James is on a minutes restriction, 29 minutes. Darvin Ham sticks to it even though it was a somewhat close game in the fourth quarter because he's 38 years old, 21st NBA season. You fast forward to, only 2 days later against the Phoenix Suns. They're facing a 12-point deficit entering the fourth quarter. He gauges LeBron James's thoughts. What do you think about playing this entire period? He does. He ends up with 33 minutes. Now, it's not it's simplistic to say that Darvin Ham just performed a complete 180. He did say that each game is going to lend itself into how strategic he's going to be with trying to preserve LeBron or have him go full tilt. But it is going to be this constant push-pull throughout the season of how much do you want to lean on LeBron, how much do you want to preserve him because of his age and his workload, and the fact that ideally the Lakers will be at their best if LeBron's able to do less, because that means the supporting cast and Anthony Davis is a lot better.
I was going to say, I feel like this is just going to be a storyline that's going to come up over and over and over again. I know you follow the team closely, and you mentioned Anthony Davis maybe being able to offer a little bit more. How are they built to be able to sort of make up for the fact that, the face of the league, the biggest star in the world in this sport is going to have to constantly manage what he's doing on the floor?
Well, it starts with Anthony Davis. That's number one. He can be one of the best two-way players in the NBA. That's been his calling card ever since the Lakers got him in 2019. I think that these first two games really encapsulated that you're not quite sure what you're going to get from AD on a nightly basis. Now, the Lakers push back when they look at his scoreless second half against Denver, that it's not about just looking at a box score and analyzing AD's performance from there. It's about how aggressive he is. And Darvin Ham's mentioned, as long as he's being aggressive, whether he makes shots or misses shots, that's all he cares about. Because I think the thing that they're looking at through this lens is twofold. If he's aggressive, he's going to be a defensive monster, and it doesn't matter if he's not having the biggest offensive performance. And number two, if he is aggressive, some of those missed shots will eventually turn into makes. And then the second part is they got to have that same continuity and depth that really helped them get to the Western Conference Finals last season. And because they have some of that continuity, it could be plug and play with more time with Austin Reeves, D'Angelo Russell, Rui Hachimura. But as much as the Lakers have talked about they have continuity, they're also integrating some new players with Gabe Vincent, Christian Wood. And so I think the early takeaways of this opening week is that for all the continuity the Lakers have, there's also new growing pains because there are new players to incorporate. And obviously LeBron James is, a few months older.
Is the takeaway in the opening week as it relates to Denver the fact that they are a team that we know, we're familiar with, they have the chemistry, they've got the talent, that they are primed to potentially do this again?
Without a doubt. If I had to make a prediction, I think you could do 1A, 1B with the Milwaukee Bucks or the Denver Nuggets. I'd give the slight edge to the Bucks only because that Damian Lillard, Giannis Antetokounmpo duo seems unstoppable. But in fairness to Denver, they haven't missed a beat. They still have most of their championship core with Nikola Jokic. He's in his prime. Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., they're removed from their injuries, so they're entering the season fully healthy. And even though there have been some acknowledgments that losing Bruce Brown is tough, internally they feel that they have enough depth to absorb that, especially because of Christian Brown having an increased role. So when you look at this specific Denver Nuggets team, no doubt they're guarding against complacency and knowing that other teams are going to give them their best shot. But unlike other defending championship teams, this is a team that doesn't have to worry as much about their health because their core players are still in their prime. And so with that, my conversations with Nuggets general manager Calvin Booth and some of the players, they've talked about the importance of trying to get the 1 seed so that they can have some more runway against a pretty crowded Western Conference, whether it's Phoenix, the Lakers, the Clippers, the Warriors, the Grizzlies. They know that as much as health is important, they want to be able to have a rampway into the postseason. And that's, I think, a direct contrast to some other championship contending teams that are defending their title, where they think, you know what, the regular season's a slog. We just got to get through this until the playoffs. We just got to get healthy. The Nuggets feel like, obviously, health is still number one, but that they have to have their chemistry firing on all cylinders to try to repeat. So with that, they're optimistic about their chances, but they also know that there's a pretty competitive landscape that they'll have to get around.
Because you mentioned Milwaukee, let's jump over to the East real quick. What did you make of Dame Lillard's debut, and where does Chris Middleton fit into the mix now with Dame and with Giannis in Milwaukee?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the first part, clearly Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo have great chemistry, and I think that it's going to be kind of a your game, my game back and forth, where sometimes Damian's the leading scorer, sometimes Giannis. I think that they have a healthy respect for each other and wanting to make life easier for each other. As far as Chris Middleton, obviously he's the third player here, and there are question marks about his health and how well he can withstand his durability because of his recent history last season struggling to stay healthy. But talking with Damian Lillard, during training camp, he also acknowledged the importance of it's not just about how he fits in with Giannis. It's about empowering the rest of the group and fitting in so that someone like Chris Middleton can still be of value because he is a great defender. He's a great perimeter scorer. And when you're looking at how much the defense is rightfully going to be focusing on Damian and Giannis, they have to take advantage of the fact that Chris really moves off the ball well, and they can find them for easy scoring opportunities when either of those players are drawing multiple defenders. And I think because of the reference point of Chris Middleton being used to being that third guy when Drew Holiday was with the team with Giannis, I think that he will be fine from a role standpoint, production standpoint. It's just a question of can he stay healthy on a consistent basis.
And we got to look at Drew Holiday in his Celtics uniform. Kristaps Porzingis was certainly the highlight at Madison Square Garden against the Knicks. Is that what we should expect from Porzingis moving forward? Because you look at this Celtics roster and you think, wow, if they can find sort of chemistry and implement some of these new pieces in a meaningful way, they could be real contenders.
Yeah, I'm sure the Knicks fans were just pulling their hair out thinking, what if, we saw him back when he was the unicorn as a young rookie. But I think the reality is Kristaps Porzingis' comfort level with whichever team he's on has really been dependent on who his other teammates are and what his role is. And I think with the Celtics, clearly there is a need for him to do what he does best. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are going to do what they do, but they needed that additional scoring punch so that it's not going ISO heavy and that they can have an inside presence. But I think the ultimate question, would we see this on a consistent basis? It depends on his health because his injury history is not good. In fairness to him, he has had better luck and fortune with his health. Last season, Washington, talking with him, he mentioned how he had done a lot of different things with his training regimen as far as his core work and his stretching and different exercises with medicine balls and pyrometrics and all that circuit training to really put him in a better position to stay healthy as well as his recovery. But even if Kristaps Porzingis is being proactive with that for preventative measures, professional sports, you can't control injuries and when or if they happen. And that's the ultimate question because at some point we know because of his body makeup that might just lead him more vulnerable than other players when it comes to health.
I feel like in this league in particular, Mark, everybody talks about being a player away or a player or two away, and you look at the addition of a Kristaps Porzingis, assuming he's healthy, and you think, wow, that's what Tatum and Brown really needed. Now they might have a little bit of momentum here. And this Knicks squad, they really fought hard. I know they wanted to get a win in front of their home fans at the Garden, but that was sort of the sense that I was left with. I like this group and I like this roster. They seem like a bunch of earnest, good guys who want to win and have a lot of confidence in themselves. At Media Day, they talked a lot about spending a lot of time in the gym in the off season, but they might just not be quite there. I mean, what is your sort of impression after seeing them on the floor, getting back into that game, putting up a good fight, but ultimately just not really being able to get it done?
Well, I think clearly there's a lot of separation between the Bucks, the Celtics, and the rest of the Eastern Conference field. But I think that there's still a pathway for the Knicks to be a good contender. I would rank them third in the Eastern Conference. And, I know that, every team should vie for an NBA championship, but I think the best lane for them to be in is to really lean in on the continuity card and knowing that they have good head coaching and they have good team chemistry, and any temptation of making, big major move, at least philosophically, I would have misgivings about, just because you then wonder, okay, how much roster depth are you giving up? How much chemistry depth are you giving up? And it would even be enough to match up against Milwaukee and Boston, because those two teams, they're able to somewhat thread the needle where, while both teams certainly gave up, some valuable players in some different deals, the Bucks giving up Drew Holiday, the Celtics trading Marcus Smart, they still have a lot of their star talent. They still have a lot of depth, where with the Knicks, they go shopping and making deals. I don't know if they would have the same pathway with that. So I think when you're looking at this NBA landscape, there's been other teams that have decided, what, our best course of action is to just lean in on continuity, whether it's the Nuggets, the Lakers, the Clippers. And I think for the Knicks, their best odds of finding their way toward a championship will be leaning on that, because as much as we all think, well, the Bucks and the Celtics are favored, we just never know. Health can always play a thing. Our optimism about chemistry might not go the certain way. So I think they just have to lean in on what they have now, as opposed to thinking, what, we came up short in the season opener against Boston, we got to make a major move, because I think that could cause more problems than, provide solutions.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to jinx anybody, but it does seem like what you're saying is true, that injuries are the ultimate X factor that could really knock somebody out that looks like a real contender on paper. If the Knicks were able to make it to, say, the second round of the playoffs again, is that something that's good enough for the fan base and for ownership right now? When you look at the landscape in the East and you see some of these, Titan teams like Milwaukee, and you just think, we're not going to get past those guys, but this is good enough for now?
Well, that's the ultimate question. What ultimately matters is what the franchise thinks, what the owner thinks. I don't know if that's enough, because it's New York. It's a big market. James Dolan, doesn't have the biggest patience. But I think for Knicks fans and everyone at large, I think that would be a success, because, we're not handing out participation trophies, but we're just conceding the reality that the Celtics and the Bucks have a better roster. And when you're looking at those two teams, it took them time to build that. And so I think when you're looking at the Knicks, as much as you want to win a championship, there's value in building that as a bridge to then be a contender in future seasons. And again, that's not to say they got to stay pat and just be happy with where they are, but I think there is a danger in, making drastic moves and then setting yourself back. And the defending champions, the Denver Nuggets, are the best example of that, where they just continue to lean in on player development, appreciating the stars that they had, being patient with their head coaching, because they knew that Michael Malone was a great coach. And while obviously part of that is because they are a small market, I think the Knicks having that same mentality can actually do them favors in the long run.
Should Celtics fans be feeling like this is not necessarily make or break year? I'm not really sure how to quantify it. You probably can better than me, but I feel like they've given Brown and Tatum a lot of room to grow and develop, and they don't have Marcus Smart in the fold anymore. We talked about some of their new additions. Drew Holiday seems, by all accounts, to be not only a fantastic player, but a fantastic person to have in the locker room for this group. But it seems like we've been waiting and waiting and waiting for this team to find whatever they're looking for. Does this feel like the season where it needs to come together?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question, because I don't think that if the Celtics don't win a championship that they're going to blow up the roster or anything like that. I mean, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown are great talents. Tatum just agreed to an extension, but I think clearly if the Celtics don't win a championship, that should be considered a disappointing season, because they have taken time to really build this. Where they got to the Eastern Conference Finals multiple seasons, came up short. They got to the NBA Finals, 2 years ago against the Golden State Warriors, came up short. And so while their championship window just isn't this season, they have to capitalize on that, because you can't just think, oh, we'll get them next year. Practically speaking, they could, but you have to also take advantage of the moment. And so, barring, heaven forbid, any unforeseen injuries that just change the landscape, on paper, if the Celtics don't win a championship, they should consider it not a successful season.
And just lastly for you, Mark, we've kept you for too long already, but I want to talk about Bradley Beal. What do we know about the timeline in terms of his injury and potential return, and how they deal with that kind of lack of depth? Do they have enough players to make up for Beal's absence in Phoenix?
Yeah, no definitive timeline. Frank Vogel, the Suns coach, said that he didn't have cause for concern to think that Bradley Beal's lower back injury or Devin Booker's left foot injury are, long-term injuries, but they weren't missing. Bradley Beal wasn't missing the first 2 games because of load management or anything like that. Like, that was a real injury. And the question of what they can do to mitigate their absence, I think that their second game is Exhibit A, that Kevin Durant is going to do what he does. He's still playing like he's in his prime, hasn't missed a beat, but he needs help. And while I think that the Suns have some serviceable role players with Eric Gordon, Yuta Watanabe, they need a lot more consistent offensive firepower. And part of that, Frank Vogel says that he's got to tinker more with rotations and put them in better positions to succeed, so there's better floor spacing. But it's also on the players to knock down shots so that Kevin Durant isn't having to just do his thing. And, you can also say, well, maybe it's also better that Kevin Durant doesn't have to go ISO every single play. Obviously it's better if there's more balance, but I think in Kevin Durant's defense, that was usually the best play because he was the only one producing consistently. So, throughout this season, there's optimism that Bradley Beal and Devin Booker will be back sooner rather than later. But given some of their injury history, most notably to Bradley Beal, it is a question that they may have to deal with throughout the season of how do they plug and play and adapt when one or multiple star players aren't available.
I jump back out to the West Coast without asking you one question about what is happening with James Harden in Philadelphia. And so for the Sixers fans that just feel like they could maybe pull their hair out or don't understand what's going on, I mean, where is this thing headed?
Well, I will say that anything can happen. I think that the boring outcome will happen, is that the Sixers are going to wind up keeping James Harden and determining that they're relatively comfortable with the awkwardness that he wants out. Now, when he returns, that remains to be seen because, the Sixers did not want James Harden to come back because they wanted him to get back up to snuff with his conditioning. But at least there is a willingness from James Harden's side to, play this out and participate in practice and potentially be available in games. And I think that the Sixers, they've determined a few things, that their expectation for any James Harden trade has to be a trade that still keeps them in championship contention. But the reality is 29 other teams don't view James Harden through that same lens. And so I think that the Sixers feel that whatever feelings that James Harden has about Daryl Morey, eventually he'll compartmentalize that and realize that, the head coach, Nick Nurse, has nothing to do with that. His teammates certainly have nothing to do with that. So he'll eventually suit up and play and hope that, I don't want to say that he'll eventually be with the Sixers long term, but at least enough in the short term that he'll show his value, and that come trade deadline, maybe there'll be more seekers that are willing to give up more to get him in the deal.
Fascinating storylines a week into the regular season. Mark Medina, thanks so much for the time. We appreciate it as always.
Hey, thanks so much. It was fun as always.